Hi everyone, welcome
Problem.
back to another episode of Over the Hump. Today's guest is a teacher, Miss Mapua.
Hi everyone.
Hi, Miss.
Hello. Hi Pablo. Hi Joe.
Pablo, I
So,
was gonna say we should have given Miss a consent form.
That's right. That's right. I have no
technical
consent
consideration.
form.
Okay, Joe, can you start us off with the questions?
Okay, so Miss Mapua, how long have you been in the field of psychology?
How long have I been in the field of psychology? Well, psychology was my undergrad degree before I went into the field of education. So, if you're talking about how long have I known about psychology or learned about psychology, I would say as an undergrad. So that's a long time ago. And I've used psychology actually in teaching. A lot of what I do in teaching has something to do with psychology.
So, what should one expect when taking a course in psychology?
Oh, that's a good question. When you take a course in psychology, expect a lot of reading. When I say reading, it's research papers, because psychology is a field that's always changing. Because you're talking about human behavior, and human behavior is influenced by society. Society is always changing; it's dynamic. So any new change in society affects the field of psychology directly. So in order for the field of psychology to flourish and to be current, research has to continue. So when you teach psychology, of course you have theories that have stood the test of time, but there are always new phenomena that happen in the field of psychology. So there's a lot of reading of research papers, in order for you to know what is currently adaptable in the field. And there are fun experiments too. You can experiment on animals, you can experiment on humans, but of course you need the consent of your human participants for experiment.
Yeah, that's actually part of our next question, which is what do you think are the best parts of studying psychology?
Oh, there are a lot of good things about studying psychology. For one, as you said, right? Experiments are done, and interesting one at that. You can experiment on the way a person remembers things. So you can experiment on memory. You can experiment on social behavior. So a simple experiment on social behavior is maybe if you were in school and everybody was in the atrium, and let's say maybe you and your friends, maybe four of you, look up at the atrium for no reason, and then see how many people do the same thing. And that would be that would be an experiment on conformity. How many people actually look up and do the same thing only because they see what you're doing and they'd like to do the same thing? Or it could also be an experiment on the social learning theory. You learn a certain behavior by what you see other people doing. So it's quite interesting. That's one, and also, well, you also understand about yourself. You learn more about yourself because of what you learn in psychology about how a person reacts to certain situations. Why is it that some people are more impulsive than others? Why is it that other people are more observant than others? You learn about relationships because you learn how to understand the behavior of another person, how that person reacts to you. So there are many things that you can learn in psychology that is applicable to the field and to yourself as well as an individual.
But what are your favorite counseling approaches and techniques?
Counseling, okay, that's different. So when you talk about counseling, to me, counseling is actually therapy. Okay, so which is the field that I am currently in. So in psychology, like just a side information, in psychology, you can go into many fields. You can go into education, you can go into marketing, you can go into human resources, you can go into research. There are many fields that you can go into law. it's really advantageous to have psychology background when you go into law. Psychology can also be a pre-med course. You have pre-med courses in psychology that can lead you into the field of medicine. There is neuropsychology, which is one of the most popular tracks right now because of technology. And you have many fields. So the counseling approaches. So in that field, I personally do a mix of therapeutic approaches. So there is one we call Humanistic Approach, wherein you really focus on just allowing the person to express their emotions, whatever emotions that could be, whether it's anger or sadness or frustration or confusion. And the client can express this in words or in emotions. And basically, the humanistic approach is the therapist just says very, very few words. In fact, sometimes not even words. It could just be, I see. So this is what you're feeling. So when you say it back, I understand that you are feeling very sad about the situation. You are echoing, right? So you can actually use that therapeutic approach with a friend, right? When a friend comes to you and says, oh my gosh, I'm having a really bad day. So you can say, I see you're having a bad day. Okay, tell me about your day. That's already a humanistic approach in therapy. So it's allowing the person to just express their emotions, either verbally or through the emotions themselves. So that's one approach I like. Another one is I like to also do the psychodynamic approach, which is relatively from Freud. And this is going back to childhood. So Freud has the belief that many of the things that we do now as a behavior stems from our childhood experiences. So oftentimes, I do end up asking the person, so what was your relationship like with your father, your mother, your siblings? Who was the person in your life who you regarded as important when you were growing up? So those things also have a significant impact on how a person thinks and behaves in their current, where they currently at.
Okay, so moving on to our next question, because ever since I've known you in like 4th grade, you've been so good at like reading our behavior and like telling what's on our mind. So these next couple of questions are pretty much about that and how we could do that as well, and like read people's behaviors and tell what's on their minds. So first question would be, what are your go-to techniques when it comes to reading behaviors, and what particular signs do you look for when observing people?
Well, it's funny because a lot of people, they think psychology is reading minds, right? I remember 2 years ago, a student came into my classroom, a friend, and he was thinking of taking IB psychology, right? He was a 10th grader, I think, then. So they were in that part where they had to choose whatever subject they wanted for IB. So he looks around and he says, so this is the psychology classroom. He was, like sort of like some mystic place, And I said, yeah, it is. And then he goes, so miss, you read minds? I said, sorry, I just wanted to mess with him. And so I said, yeah, I do. I can read your mind right now. so he totally fell for it. He goes, you can? I said, no, actually, no, I can't read minds. I'm not a mind reader. I said, that's not what psychology is about. So I explained to him, I said, psychology is exactly what you said, Job. It's reading behaviors. You don't read minds. You can't look into a person's brain. I mean, you can with the machines that we have right now, but I mean, it doesn't equate directly to a person's behavior. But and you're not reading whatever that person is thinking of unless you have that machine, right? But then again, psychology is really about understanding, and I like to emphasize that word, understanding human behavior. And that's really what it is. You, in a way, when you read a person's behavior, you are doing several things about it. You are observing that is one of the first, right? You observe human behavior. You do that casually as you're conversing with other people. You do that within an experiment. You know, when you are doing an experiment in psychology, you are observing human behavior. You can measure human behavior as well. So that's the first thing. And then after you observe it, you then begin to understand it. You then begin to say, oh, so this is why this person is like this, because this is what I see in terms of how that person is behaving. And so for me, observing is really the first thing that a person needs to be able to do. And then when I say need, it's actually a skill. To others, it comes naturally. To some, it does not. So unfortunately for me, it comes naturally. I've always loved to observe people's behavior. So I say this to my students in psychology. Put me in an airport. That is the best place to observe human behavior. I absolutely love just being in an airport. You know, I can sit there for hours and just watch people go by, and because you see so many things happening in an airport, right? You see hellos, you see goodbyes, you see parents, getting upset with their kids because they're roaming around. You see people who are rushing because they might miss their flight. There's so much happening. And I see all of this just from behavior. So I look at facial expressions. I look at facial expressions a lot. I look at body language, how close people are to each other, the proximity they are to each other. So the less gap there is between two people, that means that the relationship is closer. The wider the gap, you know that that relationship is not that close. You see if people are turning into each other or away from each other. That's also things that you observe. So in a way, that is it's reading the mind in a way, indirectly, because our behavior essentially is a manifestation of what we think and what we feel, right? So if we think we're going to miss that flight, right, your behavior will correspond to what you're thinking of. If you feel you're going to miss that flight, your facial expression will show. Okay, so really observing behavior, and then it can stop there, and you can already figure out what that person is thinking of or what that person is feeling.
Okay, so another thing, Job, and I wanted to know is, what questions can help you read people's behaviors? Or what questions specifically are the best to ask people when you want to read their behavior?
What are you thinking of? I can see your deepened thought. Actually, this is a therapeutic approach. I can see your deepened thought. Can you tell me what you're thinking of? What are your thoughts right now? That's a therapeutic question also. What are your thoughts right now? When I say therapeutic question, it's a question you ask in therapy. Because if you say, what are you feeling? Sometimes it's overwhelming, that question alone. I don't know if you guys have ever been in that experience. When somebody asks you, what are you feeling? And you're like, I don't know what I'm feeling right now. I'm just feeling something. And you can't put a label on that feeling, but you're already on the verge of, crying, or especially when you're upset about something, and somebody asks you, what are you feeling? And you're like, I don't know what I'm feeling right now, but you want to just throw something across the room. So sometimes it's hard to label a feeling. But when you say thoughts, what are your thoughts? But when you say thoughts, it's a little bit easier to express or to share the thoughts, because it's a bit more organized, rather than if it's an emotion where it's really just, sometimes you can't even understand what you're feeling and you can't express what you're feeling. So for me, it's really thoughts. And then later on, when that person expresses their thoughts, then maybe you can ask, so what, when you think about this, how does it make you feel? So now you're trying to connect the thoughts with the emotions. When you think about this thought right now, how is it making you feel? So maybe, that's a good way also to approach a friend who, let's say if you know that friend is going through a lot right now, you start with the thoughts, and then later on you follow it up with how that person is.
That's actually very interesting, Miss, because I think naturally the biggest question would be how are you feeling, right? But now that we think of it, asking for their thoughts is much better, even though it sounds direct. So Miss, our last question is just, do you have any more tips or any other tips on how we can read people's behaviors or tell what's on their minds?
I think one thing that we can all practice every day is just to pay attention to one thing that's happening at one time. Because of technology, we are bombarded with so much stimulus. It can be coming at us 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 things at one time. And that makes it a little bit difficult for us to just focus. And even when we're conversing, what's happening now, again, from observation, what's happening now to us as a society is because we are bombarded with so much stimulus. When we now sit and talk to someone, whether it's Zoom or face-to-face, we find it very difficult to focus on what that person's saying. And even in our minds, paying attention to what that person is saying. Because you can be talking to a person, or that person can be listening to you and going, but thinking about something else, right? And it's so easy for that to happen right now to us because we're so used to being bombarded with so much stimulus. So for me, it's being able to, I always use this term on myself and to others. It's to be able to quiet the mind. When you say you quiet the mind, you just focus on what is happening at that time, at that moment, and be able to push away all of the, not remove it, it's there, the distractions are there, but being able to push it away momentarily so that you can focus on one thing and one thing alone. So whether it's your friend talking to you, or you're observing the behavior of someone, or you yourself, you're trying to just focus on one thing that you want to feel, right? So, for example, you're worried about a final exam, and then you're thinking about how your performance is going to be on that final exam. And staying focused on that thought is so important, because if you don't stay focused on that one thought, you're going to go, oh my God, I'm not going to do well in that final exam. What if I fail? This is going to happen to me, and this is going to happen to me, and this is going to happen to me. And then within 1 minute, you have 20 plus thoughts already snowballing, and your emotions are starting to get, the intensity of what you're feeling starts to increase because you already had so many thoughts from that one thought, right? So just being able to quiet the mind and focus on one thing alone is so important for everybody right now. I mean, I struggle with that a lot, and I'm not even exposed to, technology as much as your generation is, but I struggle with, just focusing on one thought. So for me, if everybody can just do that, you will have less misunderstandings in conversations with other people. You will have less misinformation going around in social media, right? Because what do? We read about something and we don't read it thoroughly, and we already pass it on to another person, and that person does the same thing. And the next thing you know is there's already fake news all over the place, because nobody takes the time to just focus, read, and then evaluate if this is something important or not, if I should pass this or not. So it's just being able to do that for me. I think it's very valuable when you're talking about interaction with other human beings. and also, for the self.
Okay, thank you so much, Miss. That's all of our questions. So that's it. Thank you so much, Miss, for coming today.
You're
Thank you.
welcome.
Yes, it's always a pleasure to like have these conversations with you. Okay, so thank you to everyone watching this, and tune in next week. Stay clean in quarantine.
Bye.